In the Netherlands, a typical retiree replaces 80% of their working income. In Denmark and Sweden, mandatory employer contributions kick in from day one. In Canada, one of the wealthiest countries on Earth, the public pension maxes out around a third, and most retirees never reach that. This is not bad luck. It is a system built this way, and the story starts with one political decision in 1965. The key to this contrast is the replacement rate, the percentage of your working income you receive as pension benefits in retirement to maintain your standard of living. In the Netherlands, this rate sits at roughly 80%, driven by a mandatory workplace pension system that covers about 90% of all employees. This ensures that almost the entire working population has a reliable income stream. Denmark, Sweden, and Iceland operate on a similar scale. These countries require regular employer-funded pension contributions, between 12% and 17% of a worker's salary, starting from their very first day of employment. These contributions are built directly into the national labour structure as a mandatory baseline. In Canada, the retirement system is designed to do far less. The maximum Canada Pension Plan benefit in 2024 is set to replace only about 33% of pre-retirement earnings. Because that maximum benefit is tied to a strict ceiling on eligible pensionable earnings, the vast majority of Canadian retirees receive monthly payments that fall well below that amount. Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson stood before the House of Commons in February 1965 to outline the structure of the Canada Pension Plan. When the legislation received royal assent that December, it established a national compulsory retirement program, but one with a strictly limited scope. Pearson's government did not design the system to act as a complete retirement foundation. Instead, they built it as a modest supplement, targeting a replacement rate of only 25% of a worker's average earnings. The architects of this system operated under a specific, optimistic assumption that employer-sponsored pensions and individual savings would easily cover the remaining 75%. For over half a century, this baseline design remained unchanged. It was not until 2019 that the federal government implemented a multi-phase enhancement, gradually raising contribution rates to lift the target retirement benefit. However, this policy update operates on a generational timeline. Because pension accruals build slowly over decades, the program will not deliver its full enhanced benefits until 2065. For younger Canadians starting their careers, this reform will eventually provide stronger security. But for the millions of workers retiring over the next few decades, the extended timeline offers little help. They are forced to rely on the private components of the 1965 compromise, stepping directly into an environment where the retirement security they expected is increasingly difficult to find. In the 1970s and 1980s, roughly half of all Canadian workers in the private sector could count on a workplace defined benefit pension. This was the bedrock of retirement security, a system where employers promised to pay retirees a predictable, guaranteed monthly income for the rest of their lives, based on their years of service and salary. But over the next 4 decades, that foundation vanished. Companies began shifting the financial risk onto their employees, replacing guaranteed defined benefit plans with defined contribution plans. In these newer setups, employers only commit to putting a set amount of money into an investment account, leaving the worker to manage the funds and hope the stock market cooperates. Eventually, for many workers, even these plans disappeared, leaving them with no pension at all. By 2023, defined benefit coverage in Canada's private sector had plummeted to under 10%. This collapse did not happen because of a single, sweeping law. Instead, federal and provincial regulators simply allowed employers to convert or close these plans without any legal obligation to replace them. The middle layer of Canada's retirement system had quietly dissolved. In 1957, the federal government introduced the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, known as RRSP. Originally designed as a voluntary savings tool, the account became central to national policy during the 1970s and the 1980s as workplace pensions weakened. The legislative logic was simple. If employers would no longer guarantee retirement income, individuals would have to fund it themselves. This model transferred both investment risk and the discipline of saving directly onto the worker. But a voluntary account does not function like a guaranteed pension. Studies show that RRSP participation is heavily skewed toward high-income earners who can actually afford to set money aside. Nationally, the bottom 40% of earners hold less than 5% of total RRSP assets. What was designed as a universal solution instead created a system where retirement security is largely determined by income during a worker's career. A 2023 study by the National Institute on Aging revealed that fewer than half of all Canadians approaching retirement are actually prepared. For workers between the ages of 55 and 64, the median retirement savings balance sits at about $184,000. While that might sound like a reasonable safety net at first glance, the actual math of a modern retirement tells a very different story. If a retiree slowly draws down those $184,000 over a span of 25 years, the money works out to roughly $700 a month. That is a small monthly cushion, not a sustainable retirement income. Even when this amount is combined with the maximum public benefits from the Canada Pension Plan and old age security, the final monthly sum still falls far short of the standard of living. Many people spent decades earning. This shortfall is not a story of individual households making poor financial decisions. It is the predictable outcome of a structural adequacy gap. When a retirement system is designed to provide only partial public support, it leaves a vast financial space that ordinary workers are expected to fill entirely on their own, a task that, for millions of Canadians, has simply proven impossible. For 3 decades, a dominant financial culture encouraged Canadians to treat their primary residence as a retirement plan. In high-priced markets like Toronto and Vancouver, where property values climbed continuously, the family home looked exactly like a guaranteed pension, but housing wealth is highly illiquid. When interest rates surged in 2022 and 2023, the sudden economic shock exposed how fragile a debt-funded asset is when used as a retirement vehicle. Real estate cannot easily be spent on daily necessities. For Canadians who do not own property, disproportionately renters, women, recent immigrants and lower-income workers, the complete absence of housing assets leaves them entirely exposed. They face the most acute financial gap in a system that quietly traded secure collective pensions for volatile real estate speculation. Canada is a G7 economy with more than 150 years of continuous democratic government and immense national wealth. It has the policy capacity to build any system it chooses, yet the current retirement gap is the direct result of a decades-long policy choice that shifted financial risk away from institutions and onto individual households. High replacement European countries achieved their strong systems by making employer pension contributions mandatory. Canadian policymakers had this same option on the table for decades, but repeatedly chose a different path, leaving retirement security to voluntary savings and volatile real estate. The crisis facing Canadian retirees is not a failure of personal responsibility. The real question is why Canada repeatedly chose to preserve a system that shifts all risk to the worker, and who benefits from keeping it that way. As one of the world's wealthiest nations, Canada's retirement gap remains a policy choice, not a personal failure. Until we address this systemic shift of risk, a secure old age will remain a luxury rather than a guarantee. What do you think? Let's discuss in the comments.